This is ridiculous. YouTube's controls for being able to pop out the chat are hidden by their little new feature bubbles. So I'm trying to figure. I'm trying to figure out how to do this now. But I think we're live. I think everything is working. Let me know how the audio is, as usual. Is anything broken? You guys can't quite see the amazing shirt. I'm not sure if this is actually even still available, but we are doing merch with this kind of stuff. This was the shirt for CanJam. Let me just double check that it's available up on headphones.com. I have to apologize if my voice sounds like, I've had a steady diet of gravel and razor blades. I've had a steady diet of gravel and razor blades. That's why I sound like this. No, it's because I got the flu from hell after CanJam. And I've basically been just out for the last since CanJam. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm a bit. Also, YouTube is telling me that my video output is not right. So I'm going to be right back. Okay. We back. Okay. So, today I'm just doing a cheeky little live stream. I figured I don't have a product to review today. Ordinarily I do, but this was sort of last minute because we hadn't done any of these in a long time. And there's a bunch of other stuff. There's a bunch of content that's aiming to be released this weekend. And so I figured I'd do a live stream today. And then that way for, the upcoming videos that we have the weekend clear for that. It's usually, I think, when most folks are watching our stuff. So I'm going on the day when there aren't as many because it's less important. But you folks are the troopers, the real hardcore folks. No, it wasn't Rona. I tested negative twice. So just a flu from hell. I was I couldn't get out of bed. It was awful. See some familiar names. Good to see you guys. Listener, what's up? Seb, what's up? A lot of folks who are in here as usual. VSG, good to see you guys. Chef Steve. Brandon. Does it make me an addict that I took an early lunch so I could watch the beginning of this? I don't know what you're doing. Giz Audio, what's up? Timmy. I never know how to say your name, dude. And I worry that if I say it the wrong way, that's a recipe for getting demonetized. So, let's just dive right into the Q&A and let's just have a chat about stuff. What's on everyone's mind? I can answer questions about if you're looking for answers on questions about products. We can talk about that today, but also CanJam questions or just life questions. So let's get into it. Yeah, my voice is all messed up. I'm sorry, guys. You're asking me about the Audivina from Hi-Fi Man or the DCA Carina. As it happens, I didn't try either of those. Mainly because the lineups were super long for those ones. Because there wasn't that much new at this CanJam. But those were some of the new ones. And they were, the booth was packed, so I didn't get a chance to listen to those. So I am hopeful that we get that stuff in. certainly I have high hopes for the Carina, because I think a lot of folks were saying that it was a lot better than the Voce. So yeah, um, I'm hopeful to get that one in at some point. And then, yeah, certainly with the Audivina as well. I actually interviewed Dr. Fang Bian. I'm not sure if and when that interview is going to go live, but I asked him about the Audivina, and he told me that they had to do some very different things just when it comes to the tuning of that headphone, and everything about it is very different from. It's not just like closing off, one of the other egg-shaped hi-fi mans. I think he said that they had to do a lot more than just that. So, yeah. How's darkness, my old friend? Did you enjoy getting arrested by DMS? I didn't get arrested by DMS. I got punched in the face. Blessing 2, Dusk, or Variations? Variations is definitely the most technical and the most, wow kind of experience out of all of those. It's the most remarkable, but I find it shouty. So what I would do is get the Variations, and I would just EQ it with the Qdelix 5K. Something like that. Best E-stat at the show, I thought was apart from the Shangri-La Senior off of that crazy head amp, L700, I think, for me. This is the thing. The X9000 is, I think, a better headphone than the L700, because the L700's tonality is quite weird. And I think the X9000 might be a little better there for the tonality. A little brighter, but also just a little more balanced. Doesn't have that honk in the mid-range quite so much. But the L700 is more technically impressive, no question, in my mind. Okay, let's continue. I didn't try the new Yamahas, unfortunately. What was the worst thing that you heard at CanJam? Worst thing. Worst thing. The worst thing I heard at CanJam, this is going to be spicy, actually. It wasn't necessarily the worst thing because it was bad sounding. It was the worst because I was disappointed. It was the atrium closed. And specifically with the default pads that they had on it at the time, I don't know what those pads were. But when Golden put I think he put the BE2 suedes on it, or some kind of suede pad on it, it improved it significantly. I still think that the open is probably better. There are some harmonic issues in the treble on the atrium closed that I couldn't get around. And I thought the open didn't have those issues. So for me, yeah, the most disappointing thing was, I think, the atrium closed, because I was kind of hoping it would be like what. I mean, when it comes to ZMF headphones, I always hope that they have a tuning like the original Auteur, and so that's why I'm really curious to try the Auteur Classic. DMS loved it so much that he just bought it on the spot. So that's what I'm looking for in a closed back, and so maybe one day Zach will make that. Let's continue. Modhouse Planner was one of the highlights for this team. Yeah, oh, definitely. I thought that was quite good. The gold one in particular was good. It's one of those ones where it's hard to know exactly it's hard to predict, what the outcome is going to be based on prototypes. But it's one of those where you really hope that the production result ends up being like that, because I thought it sounded really good at the show. I'm sorry, guys, if I sound like I have the sniffles. Yeah. Can you rank your own personal headphones? Like these ones? Yeah. So these are also custom ones. You can see the fun tack I used to adhese the pads. And these are just sort of random pads on here. I haven't really done I haven't done enough, with that, anything with that. I just wanted to have a prototype that was working to show some people at the show. So I showed it to Oratory and DMS and a couple other people in the back room there. But this is not the one that we're like it's not our front runner driver, I don't think. This is silver on peak, and the crazy thing is, like, from a technical perspective, like it's quite like detailed sounding, more so than some of the other ones that we had done. Like I felt like we were at the Sundara level for a long time, and then with this one, it was clearly better. This was, closer to the, like LCD2 range ish, but at the same time, it also does not have any. This one in particular doesn't really have much going on for dynamics. It's got all the other things, like it's got a really detailed mid range. The tuning has some quirks in the treble that would need to be fixed with pads, but it's not the leading candidate because I'm not thrilled with like a couple of. It's weird. I'm not thrilled with some of the behavior, right, on it, and then also the I wanted a little bit more. I wanted more beef with the dynamics. This just didn't really. It had the detail, but not the dynamics. Let's put it that way. But who knows? Like, don't get your hopes up about like actually buying a thing. This is a research project, and I want to get to a point where we've got something that's like good for some of those other qualities as well. To figure out, all right, well with these parameters, it resulted in this. So. But we're not there yet. Question: the HD660S2 forget frequency graphs. Does it sound good, or does it have major issues without EQ? No, it sounds fine without EQ. I just think that it's not remotely competitive at its asking price because the other Sennheisers exist and sound better. So I said it in the review. It's like. It's a good sounding headphone. It's just not better than either of the other two. It's a little different from the other two, and for people who have that kind of preference for more relaxed ear gain, which people do, like it's like both anecdotally and from an objective perspective, people do have a preference sometimes for less ear gain there because it makes it a little bit easier going for certain styles of music. Like I was even talking to Metal 571, and he's like, "That sounds like exactly what I want," and it might be. It's just that I don't think they didn't do. If they had done a little more with the sub bass, and they can't because I actually checked. Like if you look at what they did, if you measure the harmonic distortion, or look at the measured harmonic distortion on the 660S2. It's significantly higher for second order in the sub bass, where the boost is. So, I think there's a limit on what they can do with that driver in an open design like that. And so from my perspective, the issue is really just the price. If the price were of the HD660S2 were $400, then it's like, okay, here's an alternative that makes sense. Because these other ones, they cost $300 or $200 if you're talking about the 6XX. I mean that alone kind of kills it, right? But like if the 6XX didn't exist, the 660S2 priced at $400, $450 would make sense, in my view. How was the $9,000 beauty cams? They sounded all right. I bet they measure weird. Yeah, but they sounded all right. They didn't sound $9,000 worth, but they sounded like they sounded pleasant enough to where I didn't hear any major, glaring issues in the treble. The bass was boosted for sure. It sounded V-shaped, but and it sounded like it wasn't just the sub bass that was boosted. It sounded like a larger range was boosted. But again, very pleasant, like way better than any of Audio-Technica's closebacks. I just think that they gotta release that at like $1,000 or something like that, or a non-limited edition version, at around $1,000 to really get their name out there as competitive closeback headphones. Because it, for those subjective qualities and basically everything else going on with it, it sounded good. So I recommend it, not at $9,000, but as a good sounding closeback headphone, yeah. Did you ever try the Dunu Vulcan? Thoughts on it if you did? I didn't like the treble. I thought the treble it had too much what I call percussion compression due to some lower treble peaks. So I prefer the I like, it sounded technically capable, and for the most part, really, like, the tuning is on point. It's just the lower treble peaks got to me. Yeah. What is it like being on stage with the Lord of Headphone Domain? Oh God, I hope that's not Zeus. No, Zeus is a very likable guy. I really like the guy. I would consider him to be a friend in this space. When we go to shows and we end up in the same place, we hang out and it's a great time. We of course disagree with one another regularly on headphones and what's good and whether or not something is good. I'm more inclined to say that many of the things he likes are bad, and he's inclined to say that many of the things that I don't like are good. But as on a personal level, he is a ton of fun, and I recommend hanging out with him if you get a chance. And being on stage with him was fine too. Like that panel, I hope they do it again. I would love to do it again, and maybe get even more into some stuff, because I felt like we didn't really. We all sort of took turns answering questions, and so things started to get a little bit long-winded because everybody needed to have their their say on a given topic. But I think almost a more free-form kind of discussion among the panelists maybe would have been better, because we could have gotten into all kinds of fun and interesting topics. But at the same time, it's marketed as ask the reviewers. So the point was to get the audience to ask questions. But it often felt like Corinne and I were on one side of a debate, and then Zeus was on another side, and then Jude was somewhere in the middle. So yeah, it was a ton of fun. I loved doing that. Certainly a highlight for me in my career in the audio world, right? As a spokesperson in the audio world, or a figurehead. I don't know what I am, but you get the idea, right? Like being up on that on that panel with other people who like Corinne, like Jude, even and Zeus as well. That's definitely a highlight for me so far. Zeus Cadenza 12 review made cable and source no longer snake oil. Dude, it's not. If you have an output impedance. Okay, hold on. Let me back up. It is snake oil when people are telling you that cables make a difference. It's not the cable that makes a difference. It is impedance that makes the difference. And if you have output impedance that's high, you're going to see frequency response change on that IEM. I measured the impedance, and it is not linear. So, and I posted this in the comments. It got kind of lost. But, yeah, the Cadenza 12 doesn't have linear impedance, and that's why the cable makes a difference. And if you want to know more about that, we did a video on exactly that topic to demonstrate that, yeah, of course it's not snake oil when there's a measurable difference. But the problem is that many times it gets marketed as if there is going to be a tangible, audible difference when there is no measurable difference. And that's when it is snake oil. But yeah, there are examples like this where it's not. Spicy question. Focal Batiste or Meteor / SA6 for outdoor traveling? Outdoor traveling. Okay, so here's the thing. For me, the Batiste is one of my favorite headphones, and it's the one that I use probably more than anything else. But I use it at home plugged in with the USB, and I have it dialed in with my EQ settings with equalizer APO, like just perfectly. And it is my go-to, like, if you ask me, like, what's the headphone you use the most, it's that one. Because the noise canceling is just enough to make it so that, it allows me to just sort of, like, get into my tunes. And it has all the technical qualities that I want in a headphone. It's not quite on the level of Focal's wired stuff, but it's not. It's, like, just a tiny bit off of that. And for everything else, like, once I got that EQ dial in, man, it's really, really good. So it's hard for me to really answer that, because if I'm thinking about going outside, if you're talking about outdoor traveling, I personally would almost always take IEMs instead of over-ear headphones, because it's so much easier to pack away and stuff. So my answer there is, yeah, the Meteor. Out of those three to go outside, I would choose the Meteor. Because that's just how I function. Whereas for me, the Batiste is more like I wouldn't use the Batiste walking around outside. The Batiste is more of a stationary thing, in my opinion. How comfy are the NTH 100s? Yeah, they're reasonable. I mean, it's a bit small for the ears. I don't recommend the NTH 100s though. In fact, I really don't recommend them. They sound terrible. I get the K371 instead. And apparently, the build quality on the NTH 100s isn't even any better, because it feels better when in the hand, but apparently the little latches break. So I don't recommend the NTH 100. It's too muffled sounding. Mm. 10% over 10% harmonic distortion in the bass. Oh, if it's low order, even that isn't necessarily audible, but that's pretty bad for a planar. Yeah, I've heard it's a train wreck as well. So I don't. It's one that it's. I've heard enough negative about the new Yamaha that I'm not even interested in getting it in anymore. Like yeah, I'd obviously review it if I got it in, but I'm not going to go out of my way to get it in. Just because it's like everyone's like, yeah, that's not great. So there is no hype. The hype's already been killed. Doesn't need me for that. Not that I'd be intentionally going out there to do that, but you get the idea. Did max settings look any taller this time during your first CanJam sighting? No, that dude is a full-on linguini. He is the tallest man on earth. The guy's like 6'6", something absurd. No, probably not. He's probably like 6'5". I didn't try any of the Elysian IEMs, unfortunately. Guys, I'm just gonna catch up here a little bit. A lot more folks in the chat, so. Zeos is a secret agent, MI6. His YouTube channel is just his cover job. Yeah, there's gotta be some Zeos fan fiction out there. Care to comment on the Headphone stealth magnets supposedly sound less open on many models? What? No. No. Okay, so the stealth magnets are... It's literally just more 12K on certain models. On the smaller ones, like the round ones, like if they put stealth magnets in a Sundara, it wouldn't make nearly the same kind of difference that you would see on like the Aria or the HE1000, because there's less surface area. But yeah, that's all it is. Stealth magnets, more 12K. If you think stealth magnets, think more 12K, which can make it sound more open. And I actually asked Dr. Fang Ban about this again at CanJam, and he said that the stealth magnets, I'll post the interview at some point, but he said the stealth magnets, he basically echoed what I've been saying for a long time when people ask me about that on live streams. But it's a parameter that they can use, and if it's a parameter that makes sense for a given model, they'll put it in there. But if it doesn't, they can go back and they don't have to put it in there, right? So if a headphone's already too bright at 12K, it doesn't make sense for them to put stealth magnets in it, because it's literally just more energy there. And if you want to know how that sounds, if you have a non-stealth version, use EQ and boost 12K, and that's what the stealth magnet version would sound like. It sounds better to you, then the stealth magnet one might be the way to go. So no, don't think that it is less open sounding, because it's literally just more 12K. That's all it does. And if you're like, oh yeah, but it doesn't, there are other things going on with the aria and the bass and stuff, it's like, yeah, the entire structure of the housing looks different as well. But the stealth magnets specifically are just doing, that's 12K is the only thing that they're affecting, or like basically 11 to 13K, that range. How resolving are you? These days I'm feeling a little bit blunted, to be honest. All right, let's go, listener. Let's go. Do you think it is reasonable to take data from 5128 squigs of IEMs, EQ to preferred tilt and shutters, statically compensate to get a 711 target more congruent with 5128 results? No, I don't think that's reasonable. Statically compensate? You mean like scrape the data? No. Okay, so let me just think about this. You're suggesting get the IM to seal first and foremost, because that's always the challenge with the 5128, it's more difficult to get a seal. Then EQ to match the target, then then measure it on 711. No. And the reason I know this is I've tried it. I've had to do this. I can't talk about why I've had to do this, but it, yeah. What happens is you end up when you measure it on 711, you end up seeing a bunch of fine-grained stuff in the treble on 711 that looks a bit weird, right? Because there are fine-grained things going on for an HRTF that is better. It's more you get more information on the 5128 than you do, especially in the treble, right? And in the upper treble as well. And so those features, they sort of track with your EQ on 711 as well. But it looks pretty weird when you do that. So the idea of then using that as a target on 711, I think it's bound to be a bit weird. Yeah. I think it just is going to end up inevitably looking slightly wrong. And it's not going to it doesn't look like a DF, like Hemar DF, if that's what you're wondering. There's one area where it does, but for the most part it doesn't, and I wouldn't. And I think it's for the same reason that, like, when you have anything that's interacting with the physical ear canal, where there is, human-like acoustic impedance to the ear canal, you inevitably end up having that headphone transfer function issue again. At least that's how it seems in my head. I don't know. I haven't tested that enough with enough models to validate that. But yeah, I think there's too much incompatibility with an actual pin and ear canal versus 711. What the hell is Melvin? All right, Sam, thank you. What do you think makes it onto a Mount Rushmore of headphones besides one of the HG6X0 headphones? I can't have anything obvious, whereas IEMs have at least 3. Here's the thing. I'm Canadian, and so Mount Rushmore is not really a thing for me I don't know. I don't know what we're supposed to think about that. Are these like iconic figures in the headphone landscape? Is that what we're thinking? If that's the answer, yeah, one of them is the 6X0 headphone line. One of them is the HG100S, I think. One of them is probably the HE6, and then probably the LCD2F. Maybe a Focal Clear can go in there. I don't know how many people there are in Mount Rushmore. Let's see. Okay, static equals can't account for headphone transfer function. My take is it's better to have a scuffed target that has some level of accounting for 711's flaws rather than the current targets, which don't at all. Yeah, I think the issue is you get into issues in the treble with fine-grained stuff, where because of the high-res features that exist that are accurate on the 5128, where it gets into the territory of the half-wave resonance issues on the 711, certainly the clone ones, where those features are obscured by the coupler, either resonance or damping, depending on if you're talking about the clone couplers or the RIO402s. That's what I've found, at least when I was, because yeah, I did exactly what you're thinking, and because I had to send the data over to somebody on 711 because that's all they were familiar with reading. And I remember looking at the data going like, well, that's going to be a problem. I think with headphones you can get closer, provided that you. I mean, this is why I think a certain smoothing actually makes sense on 711, which is why I don't like. Yeah, I would have obviously wanted higher res even on 711 than the 1/2 octave smoothing of Harman. But I think if you go with 1/12, you start to get into weird territory with fine grained deviations that you can't know if that's correct on 711. Whereas on the B and K, you can get a lot closer. You can't know for sure without being the one who tests. The person who tests can know for sure, but you can get a lot closer. Zim, if Atrium closed versus Verite closed, I think Verite closed. I mean, again, this is I've only had the one impression of the Atrium closed at CanJam, and with the one set of pads that were on it, the leather ones really didn't like it. With the suede ones, I thought they were a lot better. But they still had tuning quirks, like in the treble. Like it sounded like harmonically weird. The Verite closed also has some harmonic quirks, but I found the Verite to be much more technically impressive, detailed, all those things. So if you're gonna pick between those two, my recommendation would be Verite closed. But again, that's don't listen to me on that, because I've had literally one afternoon with I spent 10 minutes with the Atrium closed, so that's not really enough. But yeah. What do you think about EQing the sharp high Q presence dip 4.5K and sharp treble dip 9.5K? Because I see a lot of high-end headphones have them. Would it improve anything? Is my phone going off? So certainly not the 9.5K thing, because that is a feature of the canal entrance. It's the canal entrance resonance feature. You don't want to EQ that. 4.5K, that gets into some weird stuff with HRTF. I would not, if you're talking about like the HD660S2, for example, I think that's a deep phase cancellation feature. It could be a resonance to do with the particular ear, but I would suspect that it's a deep phase issue, because it showed up in the Gross as well. I believe it showed up in the Gross as well. So in that case, I don't know if it's more about whether or not you can EQ it. But if you're talking about like high Q dips, don't worry about EQing those, because you can't hear them. Auditory masking is a hell of a drug. If you have a really narrow Q dip, that's not like a narrow Q peak. Narrow Q peaks you can definitely hear. They're very, offensive, often offensive. Narrow Q, well, not all the time, but sometimes they are. If they're just like, if it's smooth and then there's like a narrow Q peak, like some of the Bear Dynamic stuff, it can be offensive. But narrow Q dips, they're not, you don't really notice them. They're too close in proximity to the fundamentals or what, the tone, the harmonics on either side. So I wouldn't really worry too much about narrow Q dips. All right. Well, people talking about DACs and amps. What is Melvin? What are you guys talking about? Who is Melvin? Focal clear under $1,000. Yeah, it's good. That's probably one of the go-tos under $1,000. But is it worse than reviewer targets though? No, that's not worse than reviewer targets. The issue with reviewer targets, oh man, this could go... Okay. Reviewer targets for IEMs, it's okay, because, at least in my opinion, because oftentimes those are... So, let me back up. When you're dealing with IEMs and the way that those targets are devised, sometimes it's just by taking a look at a whole bunch of different IEMs that are measured to see, okay, I like this IEM. Let's see how close we can get. I've done that, right? Like, let's see, let's kind of smooth that, and then, that's kind of close to what a target would be like. Maybe I'll EQ a couple things, and then boom, there's a target. I'm fine with that because we're talking about like individual reviewer preference done on specifically on the couplers. The problem I have with reviewer targets is with over-ear headphones, because oftentimes reviewer targets will bake in an element of Harman, right? They'll say, we'll take the ear gain for Harman, and we'll apply it to represent measurements done on the alley couplers with the alley ears, the GR ass setups, and then show it relative to that sort of that target. And in theory, you'd think that would make sense because those are clone couplers that are meant to be they're 711, right? So they're meant to be kind of like the official Gross couplers. But the problem is that the shore hardness, the ear is too stiff. The pinna is too stiff on those, and at least until they release a better pinna, or more representative pinna to the KB5000, because you're not going to get the same behavior for headphones across models that you will. You won't get that same behavior on the GR-AS systems that you will on the official Gross systems with the KB5000, because the deformation character is different. And that is a problem when you're trying to use those targets. In fact, it's a problem with any target that you use on those over-ear, for those over-ear alley couplers. Now, there's some people who've tried to kind of devise their own to accommodate for this, but I still think you're never going to get the same kind of consistent results on those systems that you will on the Gross. Even if they don't match, the consistency will be different, and that's a problem. So I think it's good if we can get those more less stiff pinna. If that, I don't know enough about where that's at. If someone knows about that, leave it in the comments. But because that would be great. And my hope is that with those, once they do release those, then we'll be able to test that to see how close it is to an official KB5000, and then we can apply DF plus slope, or DF plus variable slope, whatever we decide. Then we can apply that to those systems as well, and we can have cross compatibility among Gross official, B&K official, and then Gross clone. And those are the ones that are much more accessible, right? So, so right now, I don't think that any of that stuff is reliable, unfortunately, or it's not something that I would use to predict frequency response. However, I'm also hopeful that those can eventually once people get some new pinna with more representative deformation character. At least I'm told that's the issue with it. Rob, thanks. Impedance is a mainstay for stubborn people with expensive cables. Mainstay. Yeah. I mean, if those, it's often less about the cables and more about the headphones. The cables need to have sufficiently high impedance for there to be a difference, but the headphones also need to have nonlinear impedance and have sufficiently low impedance, which is a recipe that is, you're unlikely to find that with over-ear headphones. With maybe there are some, but you're unlikely to find that interaction with over-ear headphones. With in-ear headphones, there is a chance, and as we saw with the Cadenza 12, yeah, that's actually having an effect. So Zeos isn't lying. But it's the same thing as running it out of a higher output impedance source or doing EQ. Literally the same thing. You just have, there's less. What is it? Voltage is getting divided, right? So there's less at those frequencies with nonlinear impedance. Do you think the Headphone Edition XS is worth extra money over the Sundaras? Also, what DAC amp would you recommend with these? So if you have a large head, yes, because the comfort I think is going to be better. If you have a small head, probably not. There is the advantage of the Edition XS is that you get full bass extension. Pardon me, full bass extension. The disadvantage is that the Sindara, I think, has a more versatile presentation for mids and upper mids, and then the treble is a little bit spicy on the Edition XS. But yeah, I do think that it is a better. The Edition XS is a better headphone, especially if you're going to EQ. What DAC amp would you recommend with these? It doesn't matter. Just as long as you have something there. Like you could get an IFI device and then get the X bass. That's always fun. But yeah, it really doesn't matter for those. Get something inexpensive, you know. Or if you don't like doing EQ like with a computer, get an Army ADI2. Do all planar magnetic headphones have distorted bass at high-ish volumes? No, the Odysseys don't. And generally they shouldn't. Welcome to where I publicly bother Andrew. Blaine has the new soft pinna right now, waiting on something to make the plate more usable. So far looks better, but still too stiff. Is that an official one from AliExpress though? Because I know they were working on one, and yeah, we need to test that. So if Blaine has it, that's awesome. Something to make the plate more usable. Do you mean like it's not sitting correctly in the plate, or the connection isn't good? Because or yeah, I remember the official Gross and then the clone couplers. The plates aren't they look the same, but they're not exactly compatible with the mounting mechanism. So that's a bit annoying. Oh, you got the new pinna as well, Jamie. That's awesome. Even though it doesn't quite match KB5000 stiffness, still excited to try it out and compare to the old clone. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that improvement there is going to be helpful for the entire community because it's a much more accessible entry point into doing headphone measurements. And this way, you know, even though they're not B&K measurements, if they can get closer to the Gross stuff, you know, that's going to be a big help because ideally we'd love it if or I'd love it if we could use the same targets across, you know, multiple different rigs, including the ones that are like the same targets in principle, right? They obviously won't look the same because the measurement rigs differ, but you get the idea. Having it be, you know, somewhat compatible, that would be a good thing. Is there a reason why the headphones was not reviewed the EMU Teak? It's because we can't get them. I actually asked the folks at Drop if we could get one in, and they didn't have any available. So, sorry. Yeah. What's your go-to IEM right now? I like the Cadenza 12 with the foam tips. I think it's pretty good with foam tips. With silicon tips, that sort of treble, I think listener called it hardness in the treble, which I like. There's some lower treble quirks with the silicon tips that stand out a bit to me. But with the foam tips, they tended to go away a little bit. But yeah, and then for the tuning, it's one of the few high-end IEMs that's actually reasonably neutral. So yeah, I quite like it. Other than that, Symphonium Meteor is probably on that short list for IEMs that I love. U12T would be, but I don't have it because it keeps getting sent out to reviewers, and I obviously don't own it. So, in search of best closebacks, I have the Lyric, Radiance, Fostex, TH610. To be simple sound-wise, I would put all three in the same price bracket. All three, once EQ'd, sound similar. What to buy next? Well, yeah, if you're going to EQ everything with the same result, they should sound kind of similar. But I think, like, for closebacks, that's kind of, you know, you've got the good ones there, right? I don't know what else. There's really nothing else there. You could maybe get into one of the ZMFs for closebacks. I don't know. Maybe, you know, after EQ, that Denon D9200 sounded pretty good, but without EQ, it sounded really weird. HE6 SE V2. I hope you mean V2 or Odyssey MM500. It depends. If you have a large head, don't even consider the MM500 because the clamp is just absurd. But for tuning, yeah, I do think that the MM500 tuning is a little bit more correct, but the HE6 SE V2 is perhaps a little bit more fun. It's got that dip in the mids, high ear gain, good for jazz. It's got a peak at 9K. That's the one issue I find with those. What? Okay, someone please tell me what the hell Melvin is. I am so out of the loop on that. Okay. I don't have a take on the Edition X V2, unfortunately. Sorry. You guys are talking about IEMs having soundstage. I don't think it matters. Like, soundstage, it's amazing. Like, the more you get into this stuff, the more you realize that soundstage doesn't matter. Unless it's awful. Like, there are some times when it's awful, but yeah, soundstage in general is not that important. Like, you think it is, but the more time you spend doing this, the more you realize it's not something really to be buying products because of, right? And if you are going to, yeah, just get an HD800S. But otherwise, not something worth, indexing heavily on. Instrument separation, on the other hand, that's important. What's your strategy / rules in EQ? I know not to go over Q2 for peaks. Well, you can. But would you consider Q6 as too high for a dip? Yeah, I wouldn't go to Q6 for a dip. I mean, at that point, you can just be critical of the headphone, right? I think you can go to 3, you can do whatever you want, really. But my strategy for EQ is let's say imagine I didn't have a measurement rig that I could, check, right? I would not go over 3. And I would just do I would look at the graph and I would go, all right, how can I get it to be reasonable? If something is totally out of whack. And all below 5K. And then everything above 5K I would sort of do by ear. I would, unless there's something super out of it, that you can, be fairly confident about with wide Q adjustments. But then after that, everything is, you kind of have to do that by ear. And then, yeah, you can use fine grained, stuff if you want to. Like if you find a really pronounced peak at 9K, for example, you can drop that by, like 4 or 5 dB with the Q of 5, even if you wanted to. But make sure that's something that you actually hear, subjectively, not based on the graph. Maxwell review we'll be working on that sometime next week. I have it in, but I'm still confirming with Sankar that the results are representative. Here's what I'll tell you guys. The measurements of the Maxwell will shock you. They shocked me, at least. I was like, whoa. I was not expecting that. So Yeah, Maxwell is a headphone that should be on people's radar. All right, let's keep going. Imagine the most uncool person or nerd whose opinion you couldn't care less about. That's Melvin. Okay. Okay. I have people in mind. Oh, so it's like a little pet term, like there's a sort of diminutive element to it, like they're there. Um, what's your favorite HE1 or Shangri-La Senior? I haven't heard the HE1. Oh God! Don't get me started on the whole furry thing. This is a weird subculture, guys. Well, okay. I mean, I'm in the audiophile subculture. It's a weird subculture already, and like then we can get into that other rabbit hole, and it's like, no, I'm not gonna go there. um, what's up, Amplify? Oh, is it Sajid? What's up, dude? Good to see you. Yeah, Maxwell is surprising. I'm not gonna say it's perfect, but it's, well, I can't remember what the price is at, but it's for the price, it's absurd. Put it on your radar, guys. I'm not gonna spoil too much apart from that. Um, Now we're talking all about Melvin subculture. There's so much stuff that like I am so out of the loop on because I'm a millennial. Best IEMs around 350. Well, they're probably still a blessing too in the dusk, right? I think. Do beards and haircut preferences impact headphone seal and sound preferences? On some of them, depends on the headphone. There are, yeah. So, for example, the Ether 2 from DCA, it had the worst crinkling effect for me, and other people were like, "I don't hear any crinkling issues." So, I don't know. And I think my answer was maybe it's because I have a beard. It was causing like intermittent seal or something. Would you choose the LCD2s over the Denon D9200 for EDM type music? LCD2F, yes, I would. The D9200 it has a party trick, which is to make a closed back headphone sound open, like an open back headphone. But in order to do that, they took some liberties with the tuning, so it's pretty weird for the tuning. Make sure if you're getting an LCD2F that it is not the memory foam version. The current versions are probably way better than the memory foam versions. Top 3 headphones and IEMs you tried at CanJam New York. Top 3. Well, we have a little bit of a video coming out, I think, sometime soon about our sort of picks for that. Although I don't think I gave my top 3 in that. Okay. Number 1 was probably the Shang Senior off of that Grand Cayman. Number 2 was the L700 setup, I think, from Stax. Number 3, probably Ryan's Planar. I mean, like, yeah, for other stuff, I'd probably put the Project Red up there. But, like, as far as, like, I was impressed by it, right? But, for overall, like, auditory experiences, I would rank it, yeah, with Ryan's Planar there in third. Um, is Maxwell the new de facto close back recommendation under $500? You'll have to wait and see. I think there are still reasons to consider that DCA Aeon X closed, but the Maxwell, it's surprising, man. Like, what I want on the Max. Okay, well, I'm not going to spoil any more of the Maxwell. Are the Neumann NDH30 as good as everyone's saying? No. I'm actually gonna get one in soon for review, just to do the measurements, because I don't think I've done. Yeah, we haven't done that yet, and but it's when I listened to it, it sounded really blunted. So unless they've changed something since I heard it in Munich, I would not recommend the NDH30. But we'll see, right? I'll get one in. We'll do a full review. Yeah, it's really DMS's comments on it when he heard it was that's just a headphone, and I kind of echoed that it's just a headphone. Maybe that's okay, maybe that's a good thing, but it wasn't anything special when I heard it. Resolve officially now an eStat boy. I would be an eStat boy if not for the fact that it's a bit weird when you have to take care of it with a plastic bag over top, and you have to be very careful about dust and things like that. Doug was saying to me that some people, if they're eating food while they have the headphones on, because they wear the headphones 8 hours a day or whatever, they're eating food and then somehow food gets into the driver. So yeah, I would be an eStat boy if not for some of those issues. And as Sajid's saying, the lack of tactility is definitely real. But the detail, man, like that's the kind of stuff where we can, I was saying this at the time, like we can squabble all day about frequency response and headphone targets and all this shit online, but for people who've actually heard the L700 and other eStats like that, like it doesn't matter. Like, I'm sorry. There is just something else to the experience that cannot be explained by what you see on the graph. It does not track with that. And then, on the flip side, you take something like the Stealth or the Expanse, and it's like, yeah, the Expanse is a great example. It's like, if you were to just look at the graphs, right? The Expanse looks like it should be better. It should be so much better. And it is like not even remotely close. Like it's not even in the same world. Like the Expanse sounds like it costs like $100, while the Stack sounds like $10,000. It's ridiculous, as far as this idea about resolution is concerned. So this is the reason why, as much as I would love to be a full-blown objectivist and just talk about frequency response and just talk about data and science and objective stuff, there is something else to the experience of actually listening to this stuff that isn't captured or fully represented by the data. And Stax is a great example of that, as are some of the DCA headphones, as are the Abyss headphones are another example of this, where they measure like a dog's breakfast, but there is something about that it completely transcends what you see on the graph. That's there's just something else to the experience, and I have some theories as to what that might be, because I think anything that can be heard can be measured, but the way that it's measured right now doesn't account for that. I think there's more to it than what we're able to understand from an existing analysis of the data. And I've been on my soapbox there for a long time, but these are areas where Blaine and I we still have some disagreements when it comes to that stuff. Like I've learned a lot through conversations with him and oratory as well, but I still think, I think Corinne and I are probably more aligned on this kind of stuff, that there is still something else to the experience that we can't perfectly match to the graph yet. Did you like the Bravura more than those eStats? I think the L700 is more technical than the Bravura, but the Bravura's tuning is at least much better. Like the Bravura actually sounds normal in a good way for the tuning. Plus, it has some of the E-stat technicalities. So that's what I like about the Bravura. It's one where it's a little bit. It might not be on the level of the L700 for detail, but like it's way less esoteric for timbre and the rest of the tuning. Would you say Meteor or SA6 better for clear/emphasized vocals while maintaining good macrodynamics for high energy synthetic music, EDM, techno, trance? Oh yeah, Meteor all the way. Meteor, Symphonia Meteor is exactly what you want for that. Even Floyd Toole said no matter how it measures, a transducer isn't good until it sounds good. Thank you, Floyd Toole. Floyd Toole to the rescue. He's on our side. No, I'm just kidding. See, there is a bigger supervening issue with even stuff that I just used the term objectivist, and that's a problem because there shouldn't be sides to this, right? It's just further steps along a trajectory towards properly understanding this stuff. And some people think that we're there already, and others think we still have quite a ways to go. And I'm in the latter camp, as far as understanding, more about good in data. I think we still have a ways to go there. I didn't try the Yucotec RE2, but it looks like a tin hi-fi IEM, doesn't it? Like I looked at it, I was like, that looks surprisingly like a tin hi-fi thing, which is not a bad thing by any means. But no, that one's on my radar because people were recommending it. I think someone was also saying that it might have been received the way that it was because it has kind of the edemotic effect going on, where it's kind of less bass, more ear gain kind of thing. But I haven't tried it, so I don't know. Melvin abuse happening here. I still don't fully understand it, so. Okay, best bass under $700 in a headphone. Best bass. I don't know, maybe that EMU Teak for less bass boost but good quality bass. Maybe that Alex. You may want to down tilt it a bit because it's a bit shrill. I use Utopia pads on it, which is pretty good. And then I pop it on a high open impedance. But you don't want to listen loud if you're doing that, because you'll clip the driver. But yeah, Alex bass is good quality. Yeah. And for IEMs, I'm going to say Meteor. Do you think the Oracle Mark 1 is worth it in 2023? Yes, if you're looking for kind of a referencey style sound. I still think that the Meteor is it's a bit more expensive. But the Meteor is still, I would aspire for the Meteor. It's a bit more U-shaped or V-shaped, but yeah, I liked it the best. Best noise cancellation headphone under $400. Momentum 4 maybe, I don't know. Best sounding UX3000 definitely from Final Audio, but it is a rickety little piece of plastic. Oh, it feels like sturdy plastic, but there's really not much to the headphone, and it doesn't have any features at all or anything like that. But it is the best sounding in my opinion. Yeah, maybe the N700 and NC Mark II from Harman or AKG, because they have a parametric EQ app, which is pretty cool. Let's continue. Never thought my philosophy classes would come in handy in the audiophile world. Me neither, man. I never really thought of it like that. But yeah, I'm glad I wrote my dissertation in theory of perception because it sure does come in handy. I think I would love to do more articles or videos on that kind of stuff, because I feel like that's a part of the discussion that's missing when we talk about a lot of the science that's behind stuff. We talk a lot about even like with measurements and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot when it comes to what's going on between your two ears. So what's going on with your brain, psychoacoustics, perception, theory of perception, that's hyper relevant to this conversation as well. And I'd love to do more there because I mean that's kind of like my field as well. So I feel like I'm kind of uniquely well suited to be diving into those things. But yeah, as an example of if you're interested in this topic, I'm going to recommend a paper. I don't think okay, there's a paper by Gunter Thiel called "On the Standardization of Frequency Response in High Quality Studio Headphones" that's worth reading because it goes into that a little bit, not fully, but there's if you have a background in philosophy, that might be interesting to you as it is interesting to me. But yeah, I'd love to do more there. I'd talk a little bit about perception and how theory of perception and audio science and audiometrics kind of all interact. That's what I find the most interesting right now. Have you tried the Sveinar yet? They hate us because they Svein us. No, I haven't. It's on my radar. It should all work hand in hand, a balance of physical qualities that can be captured in measurements, psychoacoustics, and maybe more rather than being so polarized. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it should. Like, so far, there's fairly straightforward explanation for why people hear things differently from one another, and then also differently from what they see on the graph in terms of frequency response. But where I still struggle is there are things that I hear with certain headphones that don't even seem to be features of frequency response. Now they could be, but it doesn't seem like it's something I can ever EQ into something, if that makes sense. So it might be that it's certain really fine-grained behavior across the entire audio band. It might be that there's a particular relationship with compliance that isn't fully captured by a measurement fixture, given unique interactions with like human tissue of an ear canal. I don't know. There's so many different things that it could potentially be, and it's a little bit like grasping in the dark when we're dealing with things that aren't frequency response, right? So that's why, in my view, continuing to investigate frequency response at eardrums of individual people, it's not that I necessarily think that this is where we find that stuff. It's more that if we're going to go looking for this stuff, there's a pragmatic reason to exhaust frequency response to the best of our ability, and to walk in with the assumption that we'll find an answer, or we'll find progress at least for this stuff, by looking at frequency response at the eardrums of individual people. So yeah, I think from a approach perspective, yeah, I think we're all working on this, towards that, and we'll eventually have a better picture there, I think. But especially as measurement equipment improves, the more human-like it gets, the better. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily all there is to it. It's just that, it's more prudent to exhaust that first. Melvin abuse is just justified cyberbullying. Good upgrades from the Truthier Hexa. Again, Symphonium Meteor. Are you going to... Come on. Are you going to have a community poll / trial for your new targets soon? Yes. I have a forum post that's in the works. I've had it in the works for the last 4 weeks, but because of CanJam and other stuff that's been needing to get done, that continues to get delayed, right? So hopefully next week I can have it done, I hope. There's just a million things that we have to do that always get in the way of that. But it's going to be a bunch of EQ profiles that match the target, and what I want is feedback from you guys, if you have those headphones, to let me know where you want the third point of adjustment to be for ear gain. If you think that it needs more ear gain, the same, or less, I want you guys to indicate that because I have a theory, and then this is a way to potentially validate that. Because for the same reason that I might like it with less ear gain, for example. That doesn't mean that everybody likes it with less ear gain, right? Because I'm only ever listening out my own two ears. So I think getting that sort of impression and feedback from the community is super important. I need to measure the U6T on the 5128 using Funtech or just any IEM to make sure that the bump there in the bass is to see if it is from the rocking thing. It's on my to do. Do you think it's possible to side grade from the U12T under 1K in 2023? Yeah, maybe. Side grade? Maybe. At a certain point, diminishing returns kick in real hard, and it becomes less about better and more about just different. And I'd say probably around 1K is, 1K to 2K, the jump's not really. It's just different types of tunings. Maybe consider the Symphonium Helios. Maybe if you can fit the, aggressive nozzles. I really hope they come out with a version of that with more accommodating shells. Most detailed closeback is definitely the LCD XC 2021, but that without EQ, I would be careful with that one. Can you do a test with Noir where you have one with white dampening the foam insert measured, then a second EQ to the FR of the dampened on the 5128 and AB them? No, that's not going to work because the unit variation on those is generally quite high. And there's no way that you would be able to get a perfect match on measured on the rig. You could get close, but you're never going to get a perfect match on an actual human head, even if you get a perfect match on the rig with EQ, because they deform differently because those pads are super thick, and so it's impossible to. That one is impossible. I think you'd have better luck with something like an HD800S that doesn't vary nearly as much, and the pads are much stiffer, and that's a good candidate for consistency across different people and measurement rigs. I'm sorry for my sniffles. Okay, we'll go for another 10 minutes. Let me just catch up here. No. Reading about phase. No. That's not. There are some where that's an issue, but you can generally tell. Sphinus. They hate us because they Spain us. Yeah, man. Oh, Helios SE? Okay. Tell me more. I want that. Philphone Gang for bass. Philphone Gang for bass, soundstage, slam, immersiveness, texture, and most importantly, gaming. I need to get one in. Phil, send Headphone. Let's get one in. I didn't get arrested by DMS. I got punched in the face. Is your middle name Melvin? No, it's not. Sadly. 560S or K371? That's a tough question. Do you want open or closed? 560S. Are you talking about? You're talking about decay, like time domain stuff, right? So the problem with that is that headphones are minimum phase devices. Now, I am sympathetic to the idea that under certain conditions, those like headphones aren't necessarily perfectly minimum phase, but you can measure that. And if you like, say we use in-ear microphones at eardrums of individual people and find that there's excess group delay in that situation, then there's something worth investigating there. But there's nothing. I have come across like that phenomenon like literally once, and no other headphones have had this problem that I've come across. So because of that, what you see on a time domain graph or waterfall plot is not something that we should consider. It's not something that we should look at, because it's just a worse way of looking at frequency response in headphones. In speakers, that's a different question, but in headphones, that's not where we need to be looking first. If it turns out that if it turns out that there's some things like that breaks that relationship, that sort of proportional relationship on actual human heads with in-ear microphones, then maybe it's worth looking at that, right? But on measurement fixtures, I've come across that, yeah, again, once. Coke or Pepsi? Coke, for sure. Would you prefer the HiFiMan Edition XS or Bayer Dynamic DT 1990? Is that even a question? Oh my god. Uh, Edition XS by far. DT 1990 is one that it's a terrible headphone. I'm sorry, it doesn't sound good. It's bright as shit. If you are doing gaming and that is all you care about, and you specifically want an enhanced presentation for the like treble frequencies, then sure, 1990. But Edition XS for music every day. What headphone is he wearing? This is silver on peak, I believe. For the driver that's in here. Hearing myself talk about headphones being minimum phase devices is music to my ears. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize how much the audiophile community has distorted certain ideas around audiometrics because of like they've taken ideas about impulse response, square wave, time domain stuff. They've crafted these totally wild narratives out of it to try and suit what they think is going on because of the way the graph looks, not because of the way that physics actually works. And if you go through the history of some of these metrics, and I didn't know this until Blaine explained it to me about the history of this stuff. People used to use these metrics like square wave, because that's all they had. And we had a long discussion about Fourier as well, or Fourier, I don't know how to say that, but basically these other metrics are just worse ways of looking at the same thing. Like they're antiquated ways of looking at the same thing, or ways of looking at the same thing with worse information available, worse views available. So the sort of perversion of those metrics by the audio community is it's a bit staggering, actually. So really, the things that matter reliably that we can anchor our impressions to, it's frequency response and distortion. As long as the distortion doesn't matter as long as it isn't awful. But there are situations where distortion is awful, right? And then it matters. Did you attend any of the seminars? If so, was there any that you found particularly interesting? I attended Sean's. So yeah, Dr. Olive's seminar was fairly packed. It was it was important to be there. I felt because I think his talk was the most important for industry folks. Jude's talk is always great as well, but I'd been to that one before, and so this one was about what Harman is doing with 5.128 moving forward, and they called us out in that presentation specifically by name. He had an entire slide dedicated to the video we did, which was fun. And he called us out for having a clickbait title, basically, to the video, which is fair, but we had to do it, you know. If you're going to make any content for YouTube, you might as well do your best to make it reach as many people as possible, and it worked. So. Audio metrics because he is Canadian. For those in the USA, it's Audio Imperial. Jesus Christ, dudes. Lots of confirmation bias in the hobby. Yeah, but also on the measurement side of like on the quote unquote objective side as well, right? There are people who will see, you know, a headphone perfectly match Harman. They'll be like, that means it's perfect, and then they'll listen to it and be like, it is perfect. But if you actually had them listen to a different headphone that had a different tuning, they might actually like it more. And this is something they can't understand properly. That like them looking at the graph and gaining confidence from that is responsible for them having the perception or the idea that what they're listening to is actually good. So you know, as soon as you look at the graph, it's like the bias is there, and they don't realize that, you know. It's just as much of a bias as, you know, a price tag might be a bias, or, you know, having particular build quality might be a bias. Looking at the graph, I'd wager is, you know, in certain situations, like when we're not buying them ourselves, right? I'd say looking at the graph is even more bias for that. Kryn rated the L700 as having S- for technical performance. He rated circle-shaped 07s and 09s at S+. The X9000 derivative of 09s. Why do you think the L700 is still more technical? Yeah, it's one area where I slightly disagree with Kryn. I think I would just swap those around. I would place the 07 and 09 as S-, and I would put the L700 as S+. Or, you know, S for the other two and S+ for the L700. It's clearly more technical, and I went back and forth between them a number of times, and it was like, yeah, the L700 is clearly more impressive. It might be that Kryn indexes for something else in terms of technical, because we could put all different things into that, but as far as like detail, it's just better on the L700. Instrument separation, that might be what it is, actually. Maybe Kryn is indexing more for or indexing less for instrument separation than I am. That could be why. Jobra, thank you. What music do you guys listen to? What are the differences between music genres? What are the differences between music genres? Are some more audiophile than others? What do you think about the M4? And can you suggest some amps up to 200 euros? I'm not the amps guy, so I just recommend getting something basic, you know, that works. THX stuff is fine. Topping stuff at that price is fine. You know, IFI stuff, totally fine. The M4, do you mean Momentum 4s? I'm sure M4. I think M4s are solid. Very bassy, but solid otherwise. Differences between music genres and what do you guys listen to? I like jazz and acoustic music mostly. I also enjoy some metal from time to time. It's a weird combination of genres, but I like music that is... It's not just in the background. I like music that commands your attention, and I find those two genres tend to do that. And as far as what genres... I do think that genres have an effect on what we listen on the styles of tunings that we like, but it's also somewhat related to recording styles as well. So, you know, if I'm listening to metal, I want less ear gain than if I'm listening to jazz, and that's just the way it shakes out. And yeah, I tend to think there are some genres that are more audiophiles. Let me just get into briefly what I've been listening to. I'm going to give an album recommendation for you guys because I want to do that in these live streams. And this is one that I discovered at CanJam, and it's probably one that I should have known about for a long time, so I'm embarrassed, but whatever. It's one that I'm recommending to you now. Riding with the King by Eric Clapton and B.B. King. This is it's very simple and basic sort of guitar music, blues kind of stuff, but it's you can get a really good feel for the instruments. So yeah, I recommend that. The way it's recorded, it's not the best recording because you can tell they're definitely clipping occasionally, but as far as the way that album is put together, I highly recommend it. Like being able to, you can hear the guitar tones so separately, and the placement of them on good headphones so precisely. So yeah, I recommend that album for sure. All graph enjoyers are just Nickelback fans. Jesus Christ. Hope not. Any thoughts you can share about why The Expanse may sound so wrong despite measuring so right? Two things. One is the headphone. Well, it's really just one thing, but most likely the headphone transfer function is the reason why it sounds so bad but measures so right. And my conjecture there is that with the sophisticated waveguide thing that they have there with the metamaterials thing, that has a unique interaction with human beings that it might not have with the measurement fixture. So it's basically a whole bunch of little holes, right? That has, the sound is coming through, and some frequencies are being affected, basically. And there's different resonators and stuff like that. And so yeah, my conjecture is that might work well for a measurement rig, but because a measurement rig is not an actual human, the actual tissue is different on an actual human. The interactions are bound to be different on an actual human. That just doesn't work on real people. That's my suspicion with The Expanse, that why it sounds so wrong, because it's not just that it sounds bad from a technical level, it sounds bad from a tuning level as well. And that's the one thing that it should do well at, and it really doesn't. And there might be people for whom it sounds closer to the way it measures, but for everybody who I've talked to who's heard it, they basically say the same thing, that it's quite shouty and harsh in the treble. And the other theory that I have is that they tend to use really stiff diaphragms, and this is pure speculation, but I imagine that this is one thing that, doing this sort of development on these custom planar drivers sort of led me to consider that, some of the subjectively desirable traits that we like in headphones come from a balance of stiffness to compliance. And I think with those, super stiff diaphragms that they use on those headphones, I feel that, it's too far in the direction of stiffness and not enough in the direction of compliance. And maybe if they went with a different diaphragm material or a different coating or something else, maybe it's the knurled diaphragm aspect, I'm not sure, but something about those diaphragms not being sufficiently compliant might be why it doesn't have some of those subjectively desirable traits. Now, again, I have nothing to back that up, just purely based on what we've done with these custom ones and where things have sort of, landed for us, like on the ones that we tried where things were stiffer, or I should say, the ones that were a better balance between stiffness and compliance, maybe they ended up being the ones that were more desirable. I will say, though, we did also go really far the other way on one of them, and it wasn't subjectively desirable either. So I don't think it's just a matter of being like more compliant equals more better. I think it's like having the right balance there for that. And I think maybe it's that the DCAs are too far the other way. It's hard to know. But yeah, that's just pure speculation. Is Dr. Olive going to redo the Harman target now that new and better measurement rigs exist? We have an interview with him coming out probably tomorrow. But it's not. You can't use the. So their method, they said even they don't use their internal target because they know that's not how you could. That's not how you should devise a reference curve on that system. So like before there was all this like, oh yeah, but there is a Harman target already for the 512. It's like, yeah, they don't use it because they know that that's not what you're supposed to do. So it's nice that we got confirmation on that from him. But I do expect that in the future they will need to, yeah, because it is the new standard moving forward. Have you or the team ever considered that many customers might pay extra to have the headphones squigged? Potentially benefits you by giving you sample variation info as well. Having their individual headphones squigged. Yeah, we might do that. Maybe. I think it's something that we're open to. We charge a premium for that kind of like, say you're buying $1,000 headphone, and if you want to get it measured, that unit measured, with an EQ profile developed, you can spend $1,200, something like that. It's not a bad idea. Are we going to review the Maxwell? Yes, that's on the radar. In sound, you have peaks and valleys because of the phase delay. The energy in the peaks are delayed time-wise back into the valleys with resonators, lower peaks and filled valleys. Okay. Just keep in mind that headphones and speakers behave differently when it comes to phase relationships and time domain stuff. Thoughts on the Focal Batiste? I was saying this earlier. This is my go-to headphone for like my daily listening because I have all of my EQ dialed in extremely well with that one. So yeah, I like it a lot, but it's, don't think that this is like the same as their wired headphones. It's not on that level. Yeah, don't worry about him. Yeah. Wait, what are you talking about with? You think resonators just work as quarter wave speakers? Are you talking about the DCA thing again? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. You don't have phase problems since there are no caps or inductors causing phase changes. Okay. Do you think the M4 is good for trap? Or what ones in the category is the best in your opinion? I also listen to some techno pop. Who you suggest? M4, APM, XM5, QC45. What's your favorite from these? M4 for sure out of all of those. Definitely M4. Yeah. And I think it is good for those genres because it has really massively boosted sub bass, and that's what people want, right? Those aren't my genres, so it's tough to say what would sound great for those, but I would expect that that's what people want. So, yeah. Focaligia only with EQ, yes. Oh, you're still waiting on the LCD X 2021 5-2/8 squiggle? Yeah, next week. It'll be on the forum post that we do. So just stay tuned for that. Big bass. Okay, guys, I am going to call it there for the stream. I have to head out because I am potentially going to be taking off for the weekend, going to the interior to visit my folks, if the weather allows. If there's a snowstorm, I won't go. But I will see you guys in the next one. Stay tuned for additional videos that we're releasing this weekend. I think we have the Sean Olive interview going up tomorrow, and then we also might have something for Sunday. I'm not sure. I'll double check. But Yeah, make sure you guys, if you enjoy this kind of stuff, consider subscribing, like, comment, all that good stuff. And if you want to connect with me, check out the Discord linked below, or also the Headphone Community Forum, and check out all of our articles, reviews, guides, and all that kind of stuff up on headphones.com. That's also linked in the description. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you guys in the next one.